Tonight, in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television, opposition MPs in the central region of Cameroon are threatening to boycott the ongoing parliamentary session if they are not allocated more time for the examination of the 2014 state budget. The SDF MPs are accusing the government of violating the law. And also in this newscast, inhabitants of Komitak, a neighborhood here in the Douala 2 municipality, have been for 2 weeks now without electricity. Plus, we talk sports football. The competition committee of FECAFOOT, that is the the Cameroonian Football Federation, and route to FIFA headquarters in relation to the appeal that was filed in by the Tunisian Football Federation. These are headlines, details and more just in a moment. Good evening to viewers. Welcome to join us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on ETV. Welcome back once again from the weekend. Inhabitants of Komitak of the Douala 2 municipality, as we announced in the headlines, have been for 2 weeks now without electricity. These, amongst other things, are some of the major problems that inhabitants of the said locality are facing, and they want immediate solutions to their problems. Jacques Ekwekinge visited that locality in the city of Douala and brought back the following report.
It is in this gutter that inhabitants of Komitak come to fetch potable water. A neighborhood in the heart of the Douala 2 municipality has been deprived of the precious liquid for weeks now. The lack of potable water has come to add to the problems of no electricity suffered by the inhabitants of this neighborhood, with Sunel electric poles lying on the ground, thereby even making access difficult to private homes. For more than 10 months now, the rehabilitation work on the road which links the neighborhood to Terminus Newbel is being carried out at a snail speed to the dissatisfaction of the population. It should be noted that this neighborhood has been classified as a fief of water-related illnesses like cholera, and also the problem of insecurity has become the order of the day, without a night passing by without a case of aggression being registered. The newly installed mayor of the Douala 2 municipality, Denise Fambu, and her deputies need to get down to work immediately to remedy the situation of the population of the Douala 2 municipality by changing the face of what has been long considered as the dirtiest municipality in the Wuri division.
Just some of the problems to be tackled by the new mayor of the Douala 2 municipality, Mrs. Denise Fampo, in the central region of the country, as we announced in the headlines. Opposition MPs, precisely those of the Social Democratic Front, are demanding more time to better examine the 2014 state budget tabled to them by the government. They are threatening to boycott the November session if they are not accorded 6 more months for the exercise. From Yaoundé, Roland Akong tells us more.
The government of President Paul Biya is not respecting its own laws. Take a listen to what the law says about the examination and adoption of the state budget.
The law says that this budget should be brought to us at least 15 days before the opening of the session, during which it will be debated and adopted. And that budget must be adopted not later than 20 days from the date of opening of the session, during which it is supposed to be debated and adopted. But here we are, like all the times, right into the budgetary session, and we have not had the budget coming.
The illegality is an embarrassment and annoyance to the opposition.
So these are the things that make us useless, unable to improve, and will continue to retrograde. And that is why whatever in the end, this budget will be brought here and forced through, but I can tell you that the SDA will not be there.
Is the SDF party going to boycott the session for the examination and adoption of the 2014 state budget?
I can reiterate to you that the SDF parliamentary group will not be a party to this masquerade.
That said, is 30 days even enough for parliamentarians of the upper and lower houses to peruse the voluminous documents of the state budget?
We're talking about 30 days in the context of where we have a bicameral, in the context of a bicameral parliament today, which means that a bill or whichever is studied by the National Assembly, sent to the Senate, which studies it and sends it back to us. 30 days are not enough for such an exercise. In most bicameral houses, a budget is not adopted under 20-30 days. It is a whole process that takes about 6 months. So this budget would have been here by May.
That's the way it goes in Cameroon's National Assembly.
And the General Certificate of Education turns 20 in the days ahead, and on the sidelines of the 20th anniversary of the GCE board, it was time for us to look at the balance sheet of its contribution in the country's educational system. And some educationists here in the economic capital Douala said that the General Certificate of Education board still has a long way to go, especially in the domain of registration, publication of results, and the time for the registration, amongst others. For Hansen Chanji spoke to some teachers here in the economic capital Douala and compiled the following report.
The GC board is 20 years, created in 1993 to foster the Anglophone subsystem of education. The Cameroon General Certificate of Education Board, according to some educationists, has some failures, which could be corrected, especially in the aspect of registration.
The period that is kept aside for the registration of the GCE, it used to be so much so that certain parents, they are not able to register their children, the registration fee. That is a general complaint that it is too expensive. So my plea is that if they can take many things into consideration and curtail it a little bit.
Some educationists believe that some measures adopted by the board is coming too late, 20 years after. They say the Anglophone subsystem of education for years now has been practicing certificate-based education.
With the GCE board, you see a subject like civics that the Francophones do right up to advanced level. That is the subject that they use in writing all competitive exams in this country. We do it and we end at the level of Form 3. But now
the English language has only been introduced for the 2014 exams in the advanced level.
You see, many students used to pass the O level from 5 and so on. When they go to advanced level, go to A level, to the universities, you discover that their expressions are very poor.
The board has also suffered problems of payment of allowances to examiners.
The GC board has been going through thick and thin. It started from the period of examiners not being paid, or they were given partial payment. At one time, teachers had to strike.
In spite of all these failures, coupled with poor means to deliver results to candidates, these educationists say the introduction of e-registration is highly welcomed.
Started from manual registration, went to OMR, and now we are talking about e-registration. It means that the GCE board has been moving with time. It has been moving with modern technology.
However,
but while we are taking certain reforms too, we should be mindful of the fact that we live in an environment whereby there are certain areas that have never heard the word electricity.
They told us that the fact that the timetable is known well in advance, even though there are recurrent mistakes, makes it a success.
And it facilitates the candidates know that timetable well in advance. That's on the spot. As soon as you are registered.
The introduction of multiple choice questions is also seen as a good innovation.
Yes, you see, the introduction of the MCQ goes a long way to help the students and the teachers to sit up and work, because like in the past, teachers used to specialize on a certain portion of the syllabus that they know that will always feature in the GCE.
20 years after the creation of the GCE board, what report card for Anglophone subsystem of education?
It will be very bad or very poor for a system to be stagnant. The GCE board has been evolving. If somebody is of the opinion that the GCE board has been stagnant, then I don't want to believe that the person actually understands what is meant by being stagnant.
Some of the strengths and weaknesses of the General Certificate of Education Board put together by Hansen Chanji, but how can the GCE board fine-tune its strategies to meet the evolving society. That is going to be our focus in the second part of this newscast. Now, some feminists here in the economic capital Douala have cautioned women who are victims of violence to reprimand their male aggressors before the law. They were speaking today as Cameroon joined the rest of the world to observe the International Day Against Violence Towards Women. Pamela Ndukong tells us more in the following report.
Violence against women and girls in Cameroon is perpetrated by several members of the society, including parents, family members, spouses, public authorities and community members. It causes numerous customs and traditions that condone some specific cases of violence against women, husband rights to beating, the practice of female genital mutilation, early marriages, wife inheritance, etc. In Cameroon today, the various forms of violence against women differ with regions.
In Littoral, we have violence against property for those who lost their husband, and you have rape for children. You have rapes, and I say violence in those who are in the marriage.
The feminists continued by saying that women who fall victim of violence, especially from torture from men and property inheritance, should not hesitate to take the case to court and sue the men in question.
We have the law, we have the sanction, but the problem is for women. Women cannot go to the court. If they go to the court or they sue their husband to the court or the person who make the violence, that person can be sanctioned.
The impact of this violence against women as concerns physical and mental health is felt through real trauma suffered by the victims. At the economic level, violence also prevents women victims to participate in public life and other development activities in the country. According to United Nations statistics, up to 70% of women experience violence in their lifetime. Between 500,000 to 2 million people are trafficked annually into situations including prostitution, forced labor, slavery or servitude. According to statistics, women and girls account for about 80%.
And here in the economic capital Douala, Cameroon's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, in collaboration with the United Nations Food and Agricultural Development Organization, RADA, the FAO, would host the Telefood fundraising exercise that is going to be Wednesday this week, November 27th, in the economic capital Douala. Telefood is the FAO's annual campaign featuring a gala night broadcast and other events aimed at raising awareness about world hunger and mobilizing resources for hunger fighting initiatives. And Wednesday's fundraiser will be presided over by the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Esimi Menye, who was in a press briefing in the economic capital Douala that was last weekend on a Saturday, and he disclosed that nearly 87 million francs CFA was raised in the economic capital Douala in 2012 for the campaign. We talk about news out of our national boundaries following deliberations amongst world leaders or most powerful nations in Geneva. Over the weekend, negotiations ended with sanctions on Iran to be relieved or to be uplifted. In return, the nation can then develop its nuclear capacity, but must prove that it is doing so only for civilian purposes. Let's have the details of that report with the Dutch Velen TV.
Mohammed Javad Zarif returned home to a hero's welcome. He has long hoped to be able to bring his country out of isolation, and a deal with Western powers could be his crowning achievement.
We're here to pay thanks to Foreign Minister Zarif. We support his work. Economic sanctions are finally being eased. This will help us to show what we're made of.
Zarif is being celebrated because Iran can now officially continue with its civilian nuclear program, as long as it can convince the rest of the world that it never intends to develop nuclear weapons. A commitment to do that is what Western diplomats see as the chief success of the meetings in Geneva.
It's a very important opportunity for the future, and I think it vindicates the policy of pressure through sanctions.
But Germany's foreign minister says the agreement still has to be put to the test.
We know that while trust is good, regulations are better. We can say to our partners, particularly Israel, that the deal is transparent, that regulations have been agreed on.
Western diplomats hope the interim agreement will strengthen progressive forces within Iran, and that the door will open to reconciliation on a broader front. Zarif announced the breakthrough in Geneva via a social networking site, a practice actually not permitted in Iran.
Now we talk sports football. As we announced in the headlines, FIFA has accorded 48 hours to Fecafoot to produce administrative documents of Joel Matip and Choupo-Moting after Tunisia insisted on their illegitimacy, and a review of the 2012 official status and 2013 draft statutes of FIFA, that's the World Football Governing Body, reveals that Joel Matip and Eric Maxime Choupo are legitimately entitled to play for the Cameroon's Indomitable Lions, and under the nationality entitling players to represent more than one association, Article 6 states that a player of an association can play in a different association if his biological mother or father was born on the territory of the relevant association. These statutes apply to Joel Matip, who has a German mother but a Cameroonian father. And on the issue between the national football team, that's the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon, and the Tunisian Football Federation, the Cameroon Football Federation, that's Fecafoot, has dispatched its competition committee to FIFA's headquarters in relation to the appeal that was filed in by Tunisia. Roland Akong visited the Fecafoot head office in Yaoundé today and compiled the following report.
At the headquarters of the Cameroon Football Federation, the Department of Competitions Monday dispatched an enclosed letter to FIFA. The letter responds to questions raised by Tunisia whether Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting and Joel Matip have fulfilled nationality criteria to play for the Cameroon national football squad. Unconfirmed reports at the time of this report say the petition has been withdrawn by the Tunisian Football Association. Choupo-Moting and Joel Matip played the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Joel Matip played full 90 minutes during the first leg of the playoff in Tunisia. Supporters of the Lions and observers have questioned why the Tunisians did not complain after the first leg match. Tunisia, it should be recalled, profited from a FIFA ruling when Cape Verde were deducted 3 qualifying points for using a player who should have been suspended for a match. The Tunisian question raises the issue of dual nationality in Cameroon and the double standards of the government on the issue.
And the World Football Governing Body is expected to give a response before this week runs out. And on that note, in sports football, we come to the end of this segment of the news. Up next, we meet our guest. Good evening to you once again, viewers. We thank you so much for joining us tonight on Talking Point. Like we said in the course of this newscast, the GC Board, that is the General Certificate of Education Board, turns 20 in the days ahead. Preparations upbeat in the Southwest region, precisely in Boya, and also the country at large. Our guest tonight is an educationist to give us an appraisal of the board that has been existing for 2 decades now. Good evening to you, Mr. Ngwane Bazi, and thank you so much for joining us tonight on Talking Point.
Good evening, Mimi.
You're an educationist here in the economic capital, Douala. You have been a teacher working with in a school here in the city of Douala. You are equally a proprietor of a center still here in the economic capital, Douala, a GC Board Center here in the economic capital, Douala. So far, what could be your appraisal of the General Certificate of Education Board that has been existing for 2 decades now?
My expression about the GC Board is a wonderful one, because first, when we first wrote the GCE in 1994, the way the GC was organized is not the way it is organized today. 20 years after, we see that the GC Board, down memory lane, we find that the GC Board have done something that each organization is supposed to do, because they have evolved with time.
It is well known that we are living in a communication or information communication technology age, and of course we an evolving society, of course with the changing in the educational systems in Cameroon and the world at large. So of course we should be expecting changes too with the GCE board. So far, there not some lapses as far as the GCE board is concerned?
Actually, there may be lapses. As we know, there is no perfect endeavor as far as we are living in this our era. The only thing is that we are calling on the GCE board to try to sharpen all their skills, so that some of those lapses that we are realizing and that we have been communicating to them, they should have a change. One of the things that we have realized is that whenever we attend meetings that are called up by the GCE board, there is no minute taken. And at the end of the day, some of the problems that we give to the GCE, that we send to the GCE board, the people who come, they give us the impression that they will tell the GCE board what we feel on the field. But at the end of it all, since no minutes have been taken, we find that nothing has been done. And that is what has been plaguing the GCE board. You need to see when you go to the meetings organized by the office back, there is somebody who is reporting, they call him reporter. And immediately, before the meeting goes over, they give you the key points which they are taking back to the office back so that they will debate on them. We need the GCE board to improve on this.
What are some of the major problems that you raise in some of these meetings?
One of the problems is the way the GCE, the registration has been handled. We are very happy that we have what we call today e-registration. But that e-registration is coming with some shortcomings, because as this year, you will find that there is no late registration. And we know that we are living where there are parents who are barely struggling. Now, a student who pays the school fees, the parents have disbursed a lot of money in the course of the year, and maybe because that father cannot have the 18 or 15,000 francs that it will take for that child to register the GCE, for that child to lose an academic year, because the GCE board is giving an excuse that it is difficult to handle late registration with the e-registration, is a problem. The second problem that we are facing with this e-registration is that the GCE board has pushed the burden of registration to the center, to the centers that are registering. All the logistics and materials that are needed for this registration, they are carried out by the school. And at the same time, the GCE board doesn't disburse money for that. When we used to have registration done manually, the GCE board used to do all the paperwork. There, they will give a meager sum of 300 francs to the to the chief of center. That is the same amount that they are giving, but they forget that we are using paperwork, we are using our machines and all whatnot. So the GCE board should try to see into that. Another thing that we have in this that we have as a problem, just like I heard over the news now, is the payment of dues by either the examiners, either the chief of centers. You can imagine that the dues that the chief of centers were supposed to be paid to the chief of centers for last year registration have not yet been paid. It's a problem, but yet they are calling on us, the chief of centers, to still carry out registration this year, whereas we don't have anything.
And that is coming when the General Certificate of Education Board is celebrating its 20 years of existence. Now let's talk about the issue of religious studies. That's a very, very vital and pertinent point there that Cameroonians keep raising on a yearly basis. This is a subject that is carried out and written at the level of the ordinary and also at the advanced levels in the general system of education, in the Anglophone system of education. But the problem is at the level of the university, they do ask for some subjects except religious studies. So what's the essence of the subject?
I think the problem is because of the bi-educational system that we are having in Cameroon. The Francophone educational system, they don't take into cognizance the religious studies as a subject. So it poses a problem. But they should realize that everything that we are doing in life, if you do anything in life without God, it is not valuable. So they should give religious studies a place. And we are also calling on the GCE board to try to revise the syllabus so that they should not only center around the Bible, but if they could merge other aspects of life, that will be that will valorize that subject. We know they are trying to do that, but they should do something better. And we are calling on this, on the powers that be, that they should know that these students who have these subjects have worked for them. So they should try to incorporate it as a full subject like others.
Now the multiple choice questions that were equally introduced, how is the General Certificate of Education Board coping with it? Is it a success? Quite
a success, because the way when they started it, we thought that it would pose a problem. The only problem that it is posing today is that the GCE board should try to reduce the number of students per invigilator. They are giving 30 students per invigilator, but we think that with that type of exam, they should give it 15, because the students at close when there are few invigilators, what the students are discussing is not relevant. That those two invigilators, one invigilator per 30 students is not evident. So we're thinking that the GC board should try to increase the number of invigilators during MCQ papers.
But the multiple choice questions, the option is moving on well. There's no problem. It's a success. And
it's a success. Only that the problem that I just raised up. But the other part of it is that we are trying to also adapt to the modern educational system, where students can know that and it makes what add value to the MCQ is that it cut across the syllabus. That is, it touches every aspect of the syllabus, so that it becomes difficult for students to specialize. And a student who specializes what we used to call SPECO, you take about 2-3 topics and you read on them and you pass. And a student today who need to get across the syllabus, you discover that those are two different students.
Students, they are bound to go through all their syllabus before they can be able to pass with the multiple choice questions. And so now, what should be the orientation of the General Certificate of Education Board to you as an educationist now that it is 20 years?
What we can tell the GC board to do today is to try to see how they can bring in other stakeholders like the teachers, because the teachers have been left out. But we should remember that 21 years or 22 years ago, they were the teachers who were on the streets. But those teachers who were on the street 20 years ago, they have been left out. And a few individuals are sitting on what the GCA board has today acquired as success, and the teachers are nowhere to be found.
The few individuals, are they not teachers?
Some of them are people who have been taken from the civil service to come and work there, because they are administrators. Those are some of the errors that our government is doing. We know that there are some teachers who are working with the GCA board. There are quite a good number of them, but if you have it where the government is trying to come in to pilot that, to censor the way the GCA board is being run, we think that the GCA board is a free legal entity, and the government should try to let it go by giving only orientation on how the educational system of this country can be changed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngwane-Basil, for joining us tonight on Talking Point.
Thank you, Mimi.
An educationist there talking about the General Certificate of Education Board, which turns 20 in the days ahead. We thank you so much, viewers, for joining us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on ETV. Have a wonderful stay in the company of our programs. Good evening to you once again.